The underestimated species. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Military Academy sparkled like a nebula caught in crystal. Floating illumination spheres cast their ethereal glow across the assembled crowd of cadets from 1,000 worlds. At the very back of the hall, separated by an invisible but palpable barrier of tension, sat the first-ever human contingent admitted to the Academy. Commander Xylith Cravath, her crystalline exoskeleton catching and refracting the light into rainbow patterns, stood at the podium. Her secondary arms twitched with barely concealed irritation as she addressed the assembly. "The annual strategic evaluation begins tomorrow," she announced, her translator converting the musical tones of High Galactic into the various languages of the assembled species. "This year's challenge will test your ability to manage a full-scale war scenario across multiple fronts, incorporating elements of resource management, diplomatic relations, and tactical deployment." In the back row, Lieutenant Sarah Chen leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes narrowing with interest. Next to her, Marcus Rodriguez kept his expression carefully neutral, though his fingers tapped a subtle pattern on his knee, Morse code that only the other humans could read. "They have no idea what's coming." The commander continued, her crystalline form splitting the light into increasingly agitated patterns. "The simulation will cover a 10-year period of conflict. Teams will be evaluated on their ability to maintain stable supply lines, manage diplomatic relationships, and achieve tactical objectives while minimizing civilian casualties and infrastructure damage." A ripple of appreciative murmurs swept through the crowd. 10 years was considered the minimum time frame for any serious military operation in galactic warfare. The various species had evolved their strategic doctrine around the assumption that proper warfare required careful, methodical planning over extended periods. "Each team will be assigned a starting territory and initial resources," Cravath explained. "You will have access to standardized fleets and armies. The objective is not just victory, but demonstration of proper strategic methodology and adherence to established military protocols." In the human section, Captain Maya Patel suppressed a smile. She'd spent the last 3 months studying those established protocols, and more importantly, studying what wasn't explicitly forbidden by them. A Voltarian cadet near the front raised one of their sensory appendages. "Commander, will the terrestrial contingent be participating under the same rules as the rest of us?" The translator couldn't quite capture the tone, but the meaning was clear enough. Cravath's crystalline surface flickered with what might have been amusement. "All teams will operate under identical parameters. Though I understand your concern, we must maintain fairness, even for less experienced species." The humans maintained their practiced neutral expressions, but their eyes told a different story. They'd spent months preparing for this, analyzing every rule, every assumption, every traditional doctrine of galactic warfare. They'd found the gaps, not in the rules themselves, but in the thinking behind them. After the briefing, the human cadets gathered in their designated quarters. The room was Spartan by human standards, designed for species that viewed comfort as an unnecessary distraction from military pursuits. "Did you see their faces when they mentioned the 10-year time frame?" Rodriguez chuckled, finally letting his carefully maintained facade crack. "They think we'll be lost trying to plan that far ahead." "They still think of us as primitives," Patel observed, pulling up a holographic display of the simulation parameters. "They've been fighting wars the same way for 10,000 years. Why would they expect anything different from us?" Chen was already working on her tablet, fingers flying across the surface. "The beautiful thing about their protocols is how they never considered someone might not take 10 years to accomplish the objectives. There's nothing in the rules about minimum time requirements. They expect a marathon," Rodriguez said, grinning. "We're going to give them a sprint." "More like a blitzkrieg," Patel corrected. "Has everyone memorized their parts of the plan?" The others nodded. They'd drilled this countless times, each person responsible for a specific aspect of what they'd dubbed Operation Paradigm Shift. It wasn't just about winning. It was about demonstrating why humanity had survived and thrived on a death world. As they finalized their preparations, A soft chime announced a visitor. The door dissolved to reveal a Meridian observer, their floating forms surrounded by the characteristic blue glow of their species. "I have been assigned to monitor your team's preparation period," the Meridian announced. "Though I must admit, I see little evidence of proper strategic planning taking place." Chen smiled warmly at the observer. "We have everything we need, thank you. Though we would appreciate a copy of the final rule set, just to ensure we haven't missed anything." The Meridian's glow flickered with what might have been confusion or concern. They transmitted the requested documents and departed, probably to report on the humans' apparent lack of preparation. Once alone again, Rodriguez pulled up the rules on the main display. They really didn't change anything from the practice versions. Every single loophole is still there. "Of course it is," Paddle said, her voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. "They don't see them as loopholes. To them, the idea of executing a 10-year campaign in less than a day is like trying to violate the laws of physics. They didn't close the gaps because they can't imagine anyone would try to exploit them." As the humans continued their preparations, the rest of the academy buzzed with speculation about how quickly the primitive species would fail. The general consensus was that they would be eliminated within the first simulated year, unable to grasp the complexities of proper galactic warfare. None of them understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their physical capabilities. It was their ability to look at a system designed to work one way and find a completely different approach. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn why humans had survived on a world that should have killed them. As lights dimmed across the academy, to accommodate the various species' rest cycles, the human cadets made their final preparations. Tomorrow wouldn't just be a simulation. It would be a demonstration of why underestimating humanity was always a mistake. In her quarters, Commander Cravath reviewed the day's reports. Her crystalline form vibrated with mild concern as she read the observer's account of the human team's behavior. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't quite identify what. She dismissed the feeling. After all, what could one small group of Deathworlders possibly do to a system perfected over millennia? She would have her answers soon enough. Unconventional tactics. The simulation chamber was a marvel of galactic engineering. Quantum processors modeled countless variables across thousands of star systems, while neural interfaces allowed participants to experience a decade of warfare in accelerated time. Each species' command center was customized to their physiological needs. The Voltarians suspended in their gravity-nullifying pods, the Meridians floating in their energy fields, and the crystalline Cravath species interfacing directly through their mineral matrices. The human station, by contrast, looked almost primitive. 5 simple chairs, standard holographic displays, and neural interface headsets that the Academy's engineering staff had reluctantly modified to work with human biology. "Simulation commencing in 30 standard minutes," announced the AI overseer. "All teams, please complete final preparations." Around the chamber, other species teams were engaged in lengthy preparatory rituals. The Voltarians were deep in their traditional pre-battle meditation. The Meridians were synchronizing their collective consciousness. The Cravath were growing their traditional victory crystals. At the human station, Captain Patel was playing what appeared to be a game on her tablet. Is this really the time? The Meridian observer's glow pulsed with disapproval. "Just warming up my pattern recognition," Paddle replied cheerfully, not looking up from what appeared to be a complex puzzle game. The observer departed with a dismissive flicker. "They still don't get it, do they?" Rodriguez murmured, making minute adjustments to his interface settings. "They think we're not taking this seriously. That's because they've never played Earth strategy games," Chen replied, her fingers dancing across her own console. "They've never had to think in terms of actions per minute or resource optimization." The countdown continued. 10 minutes before start, Paddle finally put down her tablet. Everyone clear on their roles. Nods all around. They'd drilled this countless times, but what they were about to attempt had never been done before. Not because it was impossible, but because no one had ever thought to try. Simulation commencing in 5 standard minutes. The AI announced. Please note that the first year of simulation time will proceed at 10% normal acceleration to allow for proper strategic positioning. Patel smiled. That courtesy was exactly what they needed. Simulation commencing in 3, 2, 1. Initialize. The chamber hummed as quantum processors spun up to full power. Neural interfaces activated, connecting each team to their simulated commands. The massive holographic display at the center of the chamber sparked to life, showing the initial state of the galaxy. Most teams began with careful, methodical movements, scheduling diplomatic meetings, arranging supply lines, positioning fleets for long-term strategic advantage. The human team exploded into action. Chen's fingers flew across her console, implementing what they dubbed Protocol Zero, a series of commands so rapid that the observer's display struggled to keep up. Rodriguez and the others synchronized their actions with precision born of countless hours of practice. What are they doing? The Meridian observer's glow fluctuated wildly as they tried to process the stream of data. In the first simulated month, while other teams were still arranging their initial diplomatic overtures, the humans had redirected 90% of their civilian shipping into makeshift military transports, converted their entire entertainment broadcasting network into a military communications grid, launched simultaneous diplomatic initiatives with every neutral system in range, begun implementing economic reforms that no sane species would consider in peacetime. This is highly irregular, the observer protested. Military operations require proper planning and, with all due respect, Paddle interrupted, not taking her eyes off her display, there's nothing in the rules about speed of implementation. Chen, status. Trade routes optimized. Rodriguez, you're up. Rodriguez's section of the display lit up with dozens of simultaneous fleet movements, while other species carefully positioned their forces for long-term strategic advantage. Human ships were moving in patterns that seemed chaotic at first glance. They're splitting their forces, a Cravath commander observed dismissively, a classic mistake of inexperienced. The comet cut off as the pattern suddenly became clear. The human fleet wasn't splitting up. It was executing a massive pincer movement on a scale no one had ever attempted in a single maneuver. By the end of the first simulated quarter, warning indicators were flashing across the main display. The simulation was detecting patterns it wasn't designed to handle, strategic movements occurring orders of magnitude faster than its designers had anticipated. This isn't warfare, protested a Voltarian commander. Where is the proper strategic development? The careful building of alliances. Coming right up, Chen replied cheerfully, activating the next phase of their plan. The diplomatic channel exploded with activity as hundreds of pre-prepared proposals went out simultaneously. Impossible. The observer's glow was practically strobing now. No species can process diplomatic negotiations at this speed. We're not processing them, Rodriguez explained, still focused on his rapid-fire fleet movements. We're presenting every potential ally with a simple choice. Join us now for favorable terms, or deal with the consequences of our victory later. The simulation's first year wasn't even half over, and the traditional doctrine of galactic warfare was already crumbling. While other species carefully positioned their pieces for a decade-long game, the humans were changing the board entirely. Commander Cravath watched in growing alarm as human-controlled territory expanded across the map at an unprecedented rate. Their forces didn't move like proper military units. They flowed like water, finding every gap, exploiting every opportunity, moving faster than anyone could effectively counter. This isn't how war works, she protested, her crystalline form vibrating with distress. Maybe not in space, Paddle replied, allowing herself a small smile. But on Earth, this is how we survived. When you live on a death world, you learn to act decisively, or you don't survive to act at all. As the first simulated year approached its halfway point, the quantum processors struggled to keep up with the pace of human actions. No one had ever tried to compress a decade of warfare into hours, because no one had thought it was possible. The humans were about to prove just how wrong that assumption was. Phase 2, Patel announced calmly. Show them what happens when Deathworlders decide not to play by the rules. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had thrived on a planet that should have killed them. And this was just the beginning. The system breaks. Warning indicators flashed across the simulation chamber's main display as the quantum processors struggled to handle the unprecedented speed of human decision-making. The holographic galaxy map looked like a spreading virus, with human-controlled territory expanding at a rate that defied all established military doctrine. Multiple simulation anomalies detected, the AI announced, its usually smooth voice showing signs of strain. Processing patterns outside expected parameters. Commander Crevant's crystalline form vibrated with increasing agitation as she watched the humans' territory expand. This must be a malfunction. No species can coordinate military operations at this tempo. Watch us, Rodriguez muttered, his fingers dancing across his console in what looked more like a pianist's performance than military command. On his screen, fleet formations shifted and morphed with fluid grace, exploiting gaps in enemy defenses before they even fully formed. Chen's diplomatic feed was a blur of activity. The humans had prepared thousands of conditional diplomatic responses, allowing them to conduct negotiations at speeds that made traditional diplomatic protocols meaningless, while other species carefully deliberated over each diplomatic exchange. The humans were operating on what they called diplomatic autopilot. Impossible. The Meridian observer's glow had become almost painfully bright. You cannot reduce the complexities of interspecies diplomacy to a series of pre-programmed responses. Actually, Chen replied, not looking up from her rapidly scrolling display. Most diplomatic exchanges follow predictable patterns. We just removed the unnecessary delays between obvious moves. The simulation's third hour, representing what should have been the third year of the conflict, brought new warnings from the system. The quantum processors weren't just struggling now. They were encountering scenarios their designers had never anticipated. Alert. Multiple concurrent faction realignments detected. Unable to process diplomatic shift calculations at current speed. Patel allowed herself a small smile. Phase 3, everyone. Time to show them why humans excel at chaos. The human command station erupted into a new level of activity. What had looked like frantic motion before now appeared almost peaceful, each team member moving with precise, practiced efficiency. What are they doing now? A Voltarian commander demanded, their gravity pod pulsing with agitation. The answer became apparent as the galaxy map transformed. The humans weren't just conquering territory. They were fundamentally restructuring the political and economic foundations of every system they controlled. This is madness, Crevant protested. You cannot reorganize entire civilizations in the middle of a war. Why not? Chen asked, genuinely curious. Earth history is full of examples of societies being completely transformed during conflicts. We call it total war, when every aspect of society is oriented toward the war effort. The simulation's warnings became more urgent. The humans weren't just breaking military protocols. They were shattering the fundamental assumptions built into the system itself. Alert. Invalid economic configuration detected. Productive capacity exceeds theoretical maximum for given technology level. Rodriguez chuckled. They never considered that someone might completely reorganize industrial production methods in the middle of a war. Earth did it in months during our world wars. The other species watched in horror as human-controlled systems achieved productivity levels that should have been impossible. The humans hadn't just optimized existing production. They had completely reimagined how resources could be used. But the social instability. A Cravath analyst stuttered. No civilization can maintain cohesion under such rapid change. That's where you're wrong, Paddle explained, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding on the displays. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our physical capabilities. It's our adaptability. We thrive on change. The simulation's 6th hour brought new warnings as the human strategy began to affect parts of the system that weren't even supposed to be mutable. Alert! Cultural paradigm shift detected in multiple sectors, unable to calculate social stability metrics. We call it cultural victory in our strategy games, Chen said, her diplomatic channels now processing cultural and social changes as rapidly as military movements. Why conquer a civilization when you can make them want to join you? The humans' approach wasn't just winning the war. It was rewriting the rules of what was possible in galactic warfare. Traditional doctrine said that societies needed time to adapt to changes. The humans were proving that necessity could drive evolution at speeds previously thought impossible. This isn't a simulation anymore, Cravath realized, her crystalline form dimming with shock. This is a demonstration of why Earth species survived on a death world. Precisely, Patel confirmed. On Earth, those who couldn't adapt quickly died. We're the descendants of those who could remake themselves fast enough to survive. And now, she gestured at the main display, where the simulation was showing signs of complete breakdown. The quantum processors couldn't handle the speed of change, the simultaneous transformations occurring across multiple domains of warfare. Alert! Unable to maintain simulation coherence. Multiple cascading paradigm shifts detected. System stability compromised. They're going to crash the entire simulation. The Meridian observer realized, their glow flickering with disbelief. No, Chen corrected, finally looking up from her console with a satisfied smile. We're going to transcend it. Rodriguez, initiate final phase. As Rodriguez's fingers flew across his console one last time, the main display erupted with new warnings. The humans weren't just breaking the rules of warfare. They were about to demonstrate why rules existed in the first place, and why sometimes breaking them was the only way to win. Paradigm shift. The simulation chamber's main display had become a cascade of warning messages. The quantum processors, designed to model warfare across decades, were being forced to process more changes in minutes than they typically handled in years. Final fail-safe protocols engaged, the AI announced, its voice distorting. Simulation integrity at critical levels. But the humans weren't done. Their command station had become an orchestra of synchronized motion, each cadet executing their part of what they called the final phase, with precision that bordered on artistic. What are they doing now? Commander Cravath demanded, her crystalline form flickering with patterns that indicated extreme stress. Showing you why humanity survived Earth, Patel replied, her fingers moving across her console in precise patterns. We're demonstrating what happens when you force a death world species to operate at maximum efficiency. The galaxy map was transforming in ways the simulation had never been designed to handle. Human-controlled systems weren't just changing. They were evolving, adapting in real time to new challenges in ways that defied traditional military doctrine. But this violates every principle of strategic warfare. A Voltarian commander protested, their gravity pod pulsing erratically. You can't just change everything at once. Rodriguez suggested, not looking up from his display. That's exactly what we're doing. Because that's what humanity does best. We adapt, we overcome, we survive. The simulation's warnings reached a fever pitch as the human strategy revealed its true nature. They hadn't just been fighting a war. They'd been orchestrating a complete reformation of how warfare itself worked in the galaxy. Look at these efficiency metrics, a Cravath analyst whispered, their crystalline form dimming with shock. They've achieved in hours what our projections said would take centuries. Chen's diplomatic channels were now processing cultural and technological exchanges at rates that made traditional diplomatic protocols look glacial by comparison. We call it accelerated evolution, she explained. When survival depends on change, you either adapt quickly or you don't survive at all. The main display showed human-controlled territory not just expanding, but transforming. Traditional military doctrine said that conquered territories needed time to stabilize, to adapt to new governance. The humans were proving that assumption wrong in spectacular fashion. How are they maintaining social cohesion under such rapid change? The Meridian observer's glow had become almost strobing. The cultural shock alone should cause complete societal breakdown. That's because you're thinking like a stable world species, Paddle explained, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. On Earth, cultures that couldn't adapt quickly simply didn't survive. We're the descendants of those who could evolve fast enough to keep up. The simulation's quantum processors were now encountering scenarios they had never been programmed to handle. The humans weren't just winning a war, they were demonstrating why their species had survived on a planet that should have killed them. Alert! Multiple concurrent paradigm shifts detected across all sectors, unable to maintain simulation coherence. They're not just breaking the simulation, Cravath realized, her crystalline form vibrating with a new frequency, one that indicated dawning understanding. They're showing us why our entire approach to warfare is fundamentally flawed. Exactly, Rodriguez confirmed, initiating another cascade of changes across his sector of space. You built this simulation assuming warfare happens in predictable patterns, that societies change at reasonable rates, that everything follows established rules. But on Earth, Chen added, her diplomatic channels now processing changes faster than the simulation could track them. We learned that survival often means breaking rules. When your world is trying to kill you, you don't have the luxury of doing things the proper way. The main display was now showing transformation rates that the simulation's designers had considered theoretically impossible. The humans hadn't just found loopholes in the rules, they demonstrated why the rules themselves were based on flawed assumptions. This is why we survived Earth, Paddle said, her voice carrying a hint of pride. Not because we were stronger, or faster, or smarter than the other species on our world. We survived because we could adapt faster than anything else, because we learned to turn chaos into advantage. The simulation's warnings reached a crescendo as the human strategy achieved its final form. They hadn't just won a simulated war. They'd proven why their species had become a force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. Alert! System parameters exceeded. Simulation stability critically compromised. Emergency shutdown initiated. As the holographic displays flickered and died, the chamber fell into stunned silence. The humans had done more than win. They had fundamentally changed how the galaxy would think about warfare. Commander Cravath's crystalline form had taken on a new pattern, one that indicated deep contemplation. We built this simulation to teach military doctrine, she said slowly. Instead, you've taught us why that doctrine needs to change. That was the point, Paddle replied, removing her neural interface. You wanted to see how humans would perform in your kind of warfare. We showed you why we survived on a death world instead. The implications were clear. The galaxy would never look at warfare, or humanity, the same way again. And this was just the beginning. A new dawn. The Great Hall of the Galactic Military Academy had never been so quiet. 2 days after the simulation's dramatic conclusion, representatives from every major species had gathered to discuss what many were already calling the human paradigm. Commander Cravath stood at the podium, her crystalline form displaying patterns that indicated both unease and excitement, an unusual combination for her species. For 10,000 years, she began, her translator conveying the gravity in her tone. We believed we understood warfare. We had created doctrines, established protocols, built simulations that we thought captured the fundamental nature of interstellar conflict. She paused, her form shifting to display patterns of revelation. We were wrong. The human cadets sat in their usual spots at the back of the hall, but the invisible barrier that had once separated them from the other species was gone. Now, every few minutes, someone would glance back at them with what their various physiologies could express as wonder. The simulation was not merely defeated, Cravath continued. It was transcended. In doing so, the human cadets demonstrated something we had failed to understand about both warfare and evolution. Patil sat straight in her chair, maintaining her professional composure even as Chen and Rodriguez exchanged subtle smiles beside her. They had achieved more than just victory. They had forced an entire galaxy to reevaluate its assumptions. We designed our military doctrine around the assumption that change must be gradual, Cravath explained. We believed that societies, economies, and military structures required time to adapt. The humans proved that necessity can accelerate evolution beyond anything we thought possible. A Voltairean representative raised their primary appendage, but surely such rapid change cannot be sustained. The social stress alone would be fatal to most species, Cravath agreed. But consider, humans evolved on a world that constantly forced them to adapt or die. Their entire history is a testament to accelerated evolution. The hall erupted in murmured discussions as species with vastly different physiologies tried to grasp the implications. The humans had done more than win a war game. They had demonstrated why their species had survived conditions that should have been fatal. The Academy Board has reached several conclusions, Cravath announced, her form shifting to display patterns of formal declaration. First, all military doctrine must be revised to account for what we now call human pattern warfare, the capacity for rapid, simultaneous transformation across multiple domains of conflict. She paused, allowing her translator to catch up. Second, the simulation program will be completely redesigned. We must stop training our officers to fight wars the way we think they should be fought, and start preparing them for wars as they actually occur. In the back row, Chen leaned over to whisper to Patel, "Think they'll ever build a simulation that can actually handle our methods? They're missing the point if they try," Patel whispered back. "The lesson isn't about the simulation. It's about adaptation itself." Cravath's form shifted again, displaying patterns that indicated both respect and concern. Finally, and most importantly, we must reassess our understanding of humanity's role in the galaxy. The hall grew silent again. Every species present had evolved on worlds more hospitable than Earth, had developed in environments that allowed for gradual adaptation. The humans were different. They were the children of a world that had tried to kill them at every turn. We called them Deathworlders, as a designation of their planet's hostility, Cravath continued. We should have recognized it as a mark of their extraordinary capability for survival. She turned to address the human cadets directly, her crystalline form displaying patterns of deep respect, something no one in the hall had ever seen directed at humans before. "You have shown us why your species survived Earth," she said. "More than that, you have shown us why the galaxy's traditional approach to warfare, to adaptation itself, must evolve." Patel stood, drawing herself to attention. "Commander, if I may." Cravath indicated permission with a subtle pattern shift. "What we demonstrated wasn't just about warfare," Patel said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "It was about humanity's fundamental nature. We don't just adapt to survive. We thrive on change itself. And now that we're reaching for the stars." She left the implication hanging. The galaxy had thought they were admitting a primitive species that needed to learn their ways. Instead, they had encountered a force of nature that would transform their understanding of what was possible. "A new era begins," Cravath announced, her form displaying patterns never before seen in the Academy's history. A completely new expression for a completely new reality. One in which we must all learn to adapt more quickly, to think more flexibly, to evolve more rapidly. As the assembly concluded, the various species filed out of the hall, their conversations a mix of excitement and apprehension. The galaxy was changing, and for once, everyone knew exactly what was driving that change. In their quarters later, the human cadets allowed themselves to finally celebrate properly. They had done more than win a simulation. They had shown the galaxy why humanity had not just survived, but thrived. "Think they understand yet?" Rodriguez asked, grinning. "Really understand?" "They're beginning to," Pavel replied, looking out at the stars visible through their window. "But this was just the first step. Wait until they see what humanity can really do, now that we have a whole galaxy to explore." The stars seemed to twinkle in response, as if acknowledging that the galaxy would never be quite the same again. Humanity had arrived, and with them came the wind of change that had shaped their species since the first human looked up at those same stars and decided to reach for them. The age of gradual evolution was over. The era of human adaptation had begun.